Hello and welcome to Talk the Block, the podcast where we talk about the HGTV hit show Rock the Block. I'm Amy and I'm here with my co-host, Stephen. Hi, Stephen.
Hey, Amy. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. So we're really excited to share our opinions on this season of Rock the Block, the redemption season. We're going to be talking about season 5, episode 1, and just a little bit about us.
Well, wait a minute. How can it be a redemption season?
Well, because all of the contestants are contestants who lost in previous seasons, and they're back here for their second try. And some of them we think maybe should have just called it at one, but we'll see how the season unfolds anyway.
Maybe more than one team.
Anyway, we're not designers. We're not contractors. We are people who have spent a lot of money on home remodels and have very distinct opinions about what works and what doesn't work.
Well, I can hang a picture or two.
Okay, all right. Well, yeah, but can you make a big piece of artwork out of plaster of Paris?
The question is, why would I want to?
All right, Stephen. Well, so let's talk a little bit about the 4 teams that we have this year. We have Sarah and Brian, who were on season 4, Colorado. Do you remember anything about Sarah and Brian on their first time out?
Oh, let's think. Oh, right. Yeah, Sarah and Brian. Oh, this is one of the things that I just love. So we've got a property that has an amazing view, right? What are you going to do? Let's put a big fireplace in the way so you can't see it.
Yeah, that was sort of their crucial mistake in their season. And even though they had some good ideas, that lovely spa they did in the basement, they never really recovered from that initial decision to block their view, did they?
Apparently not. I think they lost.
Okay. Well, what do you think about Keith and Evan? They were one of the losers on season 3.
And justifiably so.
Why do you say that?
Well, it's kind of interesting because what their show is bargain basement, or they get a lot of homes and they try to do very upscale remodels with a limited budget, and there's a lot that goes into that, and there's a lot of skill. And I think one of the things that they do is by trying to generate things that you couldn't necessarily buy, or you could buy, it would be very expensive, and do it by hand. And I think that's a flaw when it comes to this show, because they did it. They had that, what was it, behind the headboard? It was just ugly, and it looked like it was going to catch a bunch of dust. And no, I don't think they ever. I'm sure they must have done a couple of things that I thought was good, but so much of it was, really, why are you doing that?
Yeah, I mean, they're artistic guys, but they really lean in on those arts and crafts. And I remember what you were talking about. On season 2, they made a headboard out of like a sail, and maybe it was cool looking, but the only thing I could think of was dust trap, right? What you exactly do not want over your bed when you're sleeping. So we'll see if Keith and Evan can pull it together this season. Okay, the next team is Paige and Mitch, and they were on season 4. Do you remember anything about their season?
I remember, liking a lot of what they did. We're book lovers. They made that nice little library with the library ladder, which I've always wanted to have one, and so there it is. But it's in the living room. And if I remember right, the reason why they did it at all was because Paige's mother likes books. It had nothing to do with the fact that they're in Colorado, nothing to do with the fact that they had an amazing view if they turned right. It was just, oh, hey, we got this wall, we don't know what to do. Let's put a bunch of book storage there. And something like that would have been great somewhere else maybe, but that's, I did like it if you just look at it, but other than that, I think in general they were pretty good, but obviously they didn't win either. So.
Yeah, I remember them being a pretty solid team, but they didn't win, despite the library ladder, which I know you have a lifelong fascination with library ladders and would love to find a way to put those in our home. So the final team, Leslie and Lindsay, the twins. Do you remember anything about their first season?
You know, I remember thinking, they don't look like twins. But that's not really interesting as far as the show goes, is it?
I think they are identical twins, but they've colored their hair differently and they dress differently.
One's taller than the other.
I don't know. I bet their DNA is much the same. But
Yeah, could be.
Yeah. So.
But you know, I'm gonna throw this to you. What do you remember about them?
They seem to be a little bit fish out of water in their season. Their designs weren't usually loved by the judges, but they made one really smart decision. I think they won the bedroom challenge because they actually put in closet space. And I think this is one of the things we see with these teams on Rock the Block. They're so up for the wow factor in the design. Sometimes they forget that somebody's going to live in the house, and they don't really think about the practical things that you need for everyday living, like a decent closet in the master bedroom.
Wasn't that something that you called out with the Keith and Evan? Didn't they not have storage? Was that one of their issues?
Yeah, I don't remember. I mean, I just think like their bathroom in their first season was beautiful. If you remember, they did sort of that curved brick shower. But what that did was that it sort of stuck one of the sinks in the mirror in the corner, so it had no natural light. So again, you walk in and the room's beautiful. But if you're the person with a mirror that doesn't have any natural light, that's not practical. So when we watch these shows, at least when I watch them, I'm always trying to balance, like, could I actually make this space work for me on an everyday living as opposed to just walk in and say, oh, this is beautiful, right?
Yeah, fair enough.
Okay, so those are our contestants, Sarah and Brian, Keith and Evan, Paige and Mitch, and Leslie and Lindsay. And before we get into this week's competition, I just wanted to touch on the location for this season. They have a waterfront location in Treasure Island, Florida, and they have, for the first time, shared walls. These homes are apparently $1.7 million homes, but they actually have shared walls. So the location must have a lot of value here.
Yeah, they're oceanfront, right?
No. Okay.
They're not.
All right. This is my pet peeve for the show. They are waterfront.
Is it going to be your only pet peeve?
No, I'm going to have some more pet peeves, but it's a pet peeve of mine. Their waterfront is Ty correctly stated at the beginning, but they are not oceanfront. They are inlet front, and the inlet does not go to the ocean. It goes to the Gulf of Mexico, which the last time I checked is not an ocean. So yes, it's a beautiful waterfront view, but it is not oceanfront. Just saying.
Okay, so does that capture everything that's different on this show?
Well, I think because they have the shared walls and sort of the duplex feels, there's going to have to be a little bit of collaboration because they want the outside look of the units to be uniform. So the teams are going to have to jointly decide, sort of the outside look of the home, the garage doors, the driveway, all those sorts of things are going to have to be jointly decided.
But what they're not going to have to decide on is whether or not they have a pool.
Yeah, that's right. Everybody gets a pool this week. Yippee. Okay. Well, Stephen, let's go ahead and jump into what the contestants actually did this week. And I guess we should say this week's competition, as always, they like to start with one of the hardest rooms of the house, the kitchen and the dining rooms.
Yeah, and just following up, since there are shared walls, just pointing out who's sharing a wall with whom. And the show did this. There was no way they didn't give the contestants an opportunity to pick. They did give Paige and Mitch what they call house number 1, and then they asked them, what did you think? And they said, well, they wanted Sarah and Brian next to them, but it turns out that Keith and Evan get the shared wall house number 2, which then puts Leslie and Lindsay in house number 3, and then Sarah and Brian in house number 4. I'm not sure that it's going to matter that houses 2 and 3 kind of have no really exterior wall except facing another house. Looking at house number 1, it's a parking lot is on the other side, and then it would look like there was a house that probably somebody used to like to live in beside house number 4, but that's kind of the arrangement. So when they have to deal with the outside together, they're going to have to deal with that particular team.
Yeah, Stephen, it looks like all the view and all the action is in the back of the house where they have, again, a waterfront, not an oceanfront view.
That's right. Okay, so going in the order that they started on the show, we'll start with Paige and Mitch.
Okay, well, hey, I really liked what Paige and Mitch did. I thought they had a winning idea right off the bat by having the indoor-outdoor counter from the kitchen and then having an accordion-like window that could open up so that you could have someone sitting out the balcony on the counter at the bar having a drink, completely open to the kitchen, chatting with the people who are in the kitchen, you know, working or cooking or whatever else. I thought that was an awesome idea and probably what ended up winning. Well, I'm getting ahead of the game, but I think that was really a winning idea for sure.
I guess, thanks for listening. That's the end of our show. We've already covered who won, but no, we'll keep going. Now, so they did a very good job. These houses are 3 stories. And they started on the first floor, which is not the ground floor. So they go ground floor, first floor, second floor. I will probably get that wrong many times because I call it first, second, and third.
Well, you're not European, yeah.
Well, I thought Treasure Island, Florida. I'm sorry, isn't that in the United States? Okay, anyway. So on the first floor, not the ground floor, is where the kitchen and dining area is. And one thing that was kind of interesting, all the teams pointed this out, was that there was no walls. And I think on the ground floor, there's very limited walls. On the second floor, there are defined spaces. But on the first floor, all the teams walked into the space, and it was just wide open.
Yeah, it was a cavernous space, and here's where I think HGTV played a little bit of a game with us, right? Because they pretended like on day one, these teams walked into this giant unstructured space and had to decide where to put the kitchen, where to put the dining room, etc. But in reality, we know these decisions were made before production began because somebody had to rough in the plumbing and the electrical and everything else, right? So, I mean, I believe that the teams made the decision where they put things because there were very different decisions made, but these were made ahead of time because all that rough-in work was done when they started the competition.
Yeah, you could even see that while the overall space was the same, that there were different things hanging from the ceiling, that there were plugs in different places, that obviously there was a little bit, and you can understand why. If you're gonna try to do this in quote unquote 6 weeks, and I'm not exactly sure what the production timeline is anyway, but in any case, if you're gonna get tile and marble and an elevator, we'll get to that later, but you don't just go down the street and buy this stuff. You know, they are going to have planned it out in advance. So some of this where they're having, we couldn't get this particular tile. Well, I think that was just made for, a little bit of excitement in the show. They knew it going in. They had to have known it going in because otherwise there's no way they could make the deadline. I think what did they had 6 days? I think it was 6 days, quote unquote 6 days to do all of this. And, they're just...
It's pretty clear they do a lot of the design work ahead of time. They pre-order some of these materials because you just couldn't get it done in 6 days, even with HGTV pulling the strings to get the stuff there quickly,
Yeah, so, back to Paige and Mitch, yeah, their indoor-outdoor living, it was beautiful. Just the way it looked. They've got, when you come up the stairs to the right and at the back, very back of the house, the very back of the house is where they have their ocean view. I'm sorry.
Waterfront view.
Waterfront view. So if you're in the kitchen, you're right next to the wall that goes outside. And then there's a balcony on both the second and third floor. And so if somebody's out on the balcony, then they even set up space out there for to be little bar stools and such. So they're expecting people to be able to sit there and interact with people in the kitchen. And that was just great. Mm-hmm. One of the other things that they did, they put in, I always called them dumb waiters, but maybe, I don't know, is that not PC anymore? But
probably not, yeah.
A grocery lift. A grocery lift from the from the garage up to the just outside the pantry, but in the kitchen area. So
Yeah.
that was another thing that they did well.
Yeah, and as people who have our kitchen not on the ground floor, I can tell you this is a super winning idea. You don't want to be hauling bags of groceries up and down the stairs, especially when you have 10-foot ceilings. So I think this was really smart for them to do this.
I think, my only question is it didn't look very big.
Yeah.
I know I come home from groceries. If I've got a couple of, packs of like Powerade or soft drinks, that's going to be a couple of runs to get all that up.
Yeah, maybe the size could have been bigger. I agree with you there. And they did do a kitchen and a dining room and a pantry, which was all good. The one thing that I did not love about their house, and Stephen, this is another pet peeve of mine, is the use of wine as decoration. So,
absolutely. I love wine as decoration, especially when it's in my glass.
Well, they had a wine wall in their living room, which basically had, just a way that you could sort of, store wine against the wall in an artistic kind of way. This might look cool, but I think there's a couple problems with it. Like, first of all, if you are not a person who drinks wine or not a person who drinks at all, this is going to limit the appeal of your house, right? Because you're never going to use a wine wall, and you might even be offended by it. Secondly, if you're a person like maybe we are, who is really a wine aficionado, you want to store your wine in a temperature-controlled space. You don't want the wine to be in sunlight. You really want to take care of it so that it stays good and you're storing it for when you drink it. So wine is decoration. I think that, appeals to some people, but as a practical way to store your wine, not really something that I would advocate.
Yeah, and the good news is that the wine storage area wasn't in direct sunlight. So we love to go through open houses even if we're not looking. We went to open house recently, and there was something very similar to that. It was wine kind of stacked on the wall, right where the sun would be hitting it most of the day, and that's just a really bad idea. I mean, full disclosure, for a couple of years, I was an assistant winemaker. I've been a wine drinker a lot longer. And so the fact that it wasn't temperature controlled, I think that's okay. The other problem is these homes have 10-foot ceilings, and when they're putting in these wine racks, they're putting them all the way to the ceiling. Well, okay, I don't know how many of you people out there are 8-9 foot tall, but it makes it a little bit more difficult to get the wine at the top because now you've got to go get a ladder or whatnot. So how often is the bottle's going to be used up at the top? Again, wine is not. We kind of disagree, or we kind of agree that wine is not art. I can appreciate what they're doing, wanting to have some wine storage in the house, but all in all, no. Don't do that.
Maybe they should combine their idea from the previous season and do the library ladder with the 10-foot wine wall. I don't know. It's just a thought.
Weren't they the ones in the previous season where the wine storage was like part of the wall?
Yes.
Like the wall ended, and then the wine stuck out. And in that case, I think it was going to be in direct sunlight, and it was going to be a trip hazard. And another team did something of a wine room, and they pointed out that you could lock it, right? So, when you're putting bottles of wine about 6 inches off the floor, anybody that can reach 6 inches, say a toddler, might be able to disrupt that bottle of wine. So, I think maybe putting it that low has its disadvantages as well as having it so high. In the judging, they talked about how, you can just take it down and put art up if you want. But what they had behind the wine was wood, and it was a specific wood, and it was not painted wood. And having done a little bit of repairing wood myself, I'm like, getting these drill holes out, and then you've got to fill the drill holes, and you got to sand it down, and you got to make it look right. I think that anybody that wants to try to bring those wine racks down are going to have a little bit of a remodeling problem.
Okay. All right. So anything else that we want to say about Paige and Mitch, Stephen?
I guess in my notes, they spent $13,000 for their range.
Oh, that better be a really nice range for $13,000.
Yeah, it better.
Okay, well, let's move on to the other team that chose to use wine as decoration and talk about the twins, Leslie and Lindsay. So, Stephen, what did you think about their kitchen dining room combo?
Oh, well, okay. I like green. And they did use, I think their range was even had green on it. And it looked like everybody, all the 4 teams bought basically the same range. It had a big oven and a smaller oven on the right-hand side, and it was all 8-burner stove. But I think it had a little bit of a green front, and then they used a little green texture, I think, on the table, the kitchen island. And then the quartzite or marble, I forget.
That was beautiful.
Had little strings of green in it. And so, yeah, that really looked nice.
I thought color-wise and aesthetic-wise, that might have been my favorite because another thing they did wood on the floor, like a light shaded wood on the floor and on the ceiling. So they kind of had this light wood look with lots of green. So it seemed very natural, seemed very much to sort of fit the Florida vibe, in my opinion anyway.
Yeah, and, they used the same flooring on the ceiling. So from a economy standpoint, not only does it make the ceiling and the floor tie together, and I think they even used that wood around the window. What they had their kitchen in the same place, but they didn't have the storage and the pass-through window. They had sliding doors.
Sliding glass doors
there,
yeah. Not quite as good as fully articulating doors to the balcony, in my opinion, but at least they opened it up more so that they were letting more light in and showing more of the view.
Yeah, and I think they used that same flooring kind of around the opening. So you kind of see the same design element, same coloring and such in the house, and I think that can be pretty nice. Now, there's one other place that they use that floor tiling.
And that would be in their wine as decoration space. So they did put in a temperature-controlled wine room. It was very broad, very long and narrow, right? And so it was almost like a wine wall with a glass door in front of it. As Stephen said, that glass door could lock to keep out children. And also, it was temperature-controlled, which is nice. So again, and then they had the wine hanging from the very top of the ceiling to the very bottom. So good luck getting that wine that's up 10 feet high off the floor. But, the challenge with this is, even though it was temperature controlled, which is an improvement, you still have the thing that you're appealing to people who like to drink wine, which isn't everybody.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure how you could repurpose that space.
No, you really couldn't. I mean, it's a wine room. That is what it is. So the buyer better be someone who appreciates a wine room. Yeah. And then the other thing is, apparently they spent $25,000 on this. So
right.
Yeah.
And they have $250,000 for the entire remodel. Most of the teams seem to be shooting to spend in the $75,000 range. So $25,000, that's quite a bit of a chunk out of that.
Yeah. And as a point of comparison, I think the kitchen lift that Paige and Mitch put in was like $14,500, right? So, and if you think about like everyday value and appeal to lots of buyers, I would rate a kitchen lift coming from the parking area to the kitchen as having more universal appeal than a wine room, and it was considerably cheaper.
One of the other problems the problems with this room are lengthy. So one of the things that they chose to do, okay, now remember this townhome, you couldn't call it a townhome? Even if rated 1.7 million before they do anything with it, is it still a townhome? I guess so. So you've got the kitchen. They built a little pantry off the kitchen, And then across from the pantry, they built this wall across the middle of this floor. And there is this seemed to be a consistent trend. Everybody wanted to have arches in their doorways. So they have an arched doorway to the front of the house. It's you think where the water is and where everybody's focusing is the front of the house, but that's the back. So the front of the house cannot see the water because there's this big wall. So that's another one of my problems is that people are buying this because it's on the water, and then you're setting up half of the one floor so that if they're on that floor, they may as well never know. So
yeah.
Another little thing is it's temperature controlled, but most people, serving. Okay, I'm going to get a little bit here.
Don't go off a cliff, Stephen.
No. The serving temperature of whites and reds are different, but it's one room, temperature controlled. Okay, there's rosé too. So what you really want to do, the idea of having it temperature controlled and humidity control is even more important because you want the corks to stay moist so that there's no leakage and the wine doesn't go bad. But the idea is to increase the longevity of the wine, not having it at the perfect temperature for you to serve it. So, as I said, you can store them and be at temperature controlled all at the same temperature, but you would not serve it. Now, I say that, and I like all my wines room temperature because I like to taste the grape. But I'm going to be different there.
Well, when they finally get around to putting the show Top Sommelier on TV, we'll do a podcast on that one too, Stephen. I think that'll be great. So, hey, let's move on to Keith and Evan. So they went quite a different direction than the other teams with their design. Stephen, what did you think of what they did?
Yeah, so their overall theme was organic modern, and I guess Keith, I think Keith is the leprechaun-looking one, right?
Yeah, Keith's the shorter one.
Keith's the shorter
yeah.
one, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so he apparently loves cozy spaces. So he didn't like the big cavernous room, wanted to make sure the kitchen was, so another team that put their kitchen up in the front, 3 kitchens, all basically in the same place. But after that, he wanted to try to limit the amount of opportunity that the light would have to get through the house. We were noticing during the judging, it's middle of the day and the house looks dark. It's because they went and they put up all these walls in order to create these spaces. And yeah, they may be beautiful, but, I thought they were supposed to be decorating and building houses on the waterfront, not, I don't know, Detroit where they're used to being. So
yeah, it really didn't have like a very Florida feel. And I mean, that's okay. I mean, what's a Florida feel, right? I mean, if you like the house, you like the house. But they even said at one point that they could use these arches and architectural features to make a new space feel old. And my question is, if you're buying a new house, do you want it to feel old? You might want it to feel new. And what they did to that house definitely did give it more gravitas, and it did feel like a more established space. But, maybe that's what you want waterfront. If I was buying a waterfront house, I probably wouldn't lean toward the design aesthetic they were going for.
Yeah, they. I think what was the color was
taupe.
Off taupe.
Sorry.
Off taupe. We're not designers, so I like to write that down. Off taupe. Basically, it's not a color, but it was very muted, and I think that everything. I thought it actually looked good from that standpoint. I mean, the color, and probably in person it looked even better. So they had this off taupe, and then they had the quartzite that was had some veining in it. It was kind of pretty, and then they had this black range with bright brass knobs. I thought that was pretty stark. It just really, to me, it really didn't fit. I mean, it's, they claimed they had to do it because there was some challenge and everybody had to go out to this island and go dig up some stuff, and they got gold.
Yeah. And I would say the biggest question that I had, and I think you did too, about Keith and Evan, was that they spent quite a bit of time doing art projects for the space. So they did this very large, very heavy sculpture that they sat in the dining room, and then this big sort of picture or wall hanging that was made out of plaster of Paris that they also put in their dining room. And maybe you like this artwork, maybe you don't. I mean, it's pretty clear that Keith knows what he's doing when it comes to art. But my question is, you're in a competition for the design. The artwork is not really going to be the thing that takes you over the top or not. So why are you spending a lot of time creating art instead of putting that time into things that are going to add value to your home in terms of like raising the appraisal or something like that for the competition? And I don't understand the amount of time that they're investing in. I call it arts and crafts. That may be, that may be demeaning to what they're really doing, but it doesn't make sense to me as a winning strategy.
Yeah, they did spend so much time on that, especially that big one when. If they're actually trying to sell the house, and I mean, you could go out and you could get something to stand there and not take up so much time as part of your staging. I did notice, when they do the judging, the value isn't just appraised value. So if it's appraised value, this would have nothing to do with it. But apparently there's this aesthetic value, which is I guess a completely subjective term that they can now use in order to give somebody a win when they, didn't do anything that would have caused anybody to pay a dime more for it. So maybe that art piece, those two art pieces, that somebody's going to have to pay people to move out, because I think it took them 5 people to carry that thing in.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, art is a very specific choice. You love it or you hate it, So, I mean, I think it's, maybe that helps. I think the aesthetic thing, though, just to be fair on the judging, if the house has things that are aesthetically appealing, even if it's not necessarily adding value, it's going to make the house easier to sell, right? So I think there is value there. Yeah,
and they called out some of the choices. And Amy has called out the fact that, having the wine storage area could throw some people off. And, if you've got a specific buyer in mind and you do everything for that, then you're very limited in the number of people that are going to come through and qualify at that particular aesthetic. But, I don't know. In fact, what they said was that they like impactful art because they like to have impactful art.
If you don't like impactful art, that's not going to be something that's going to help sell the house.
Oh, it was impactful. If that thing fell over, that would be a big impact.
It would be an impact for sure. Yeah. You would probably not want to have that with your toddler who might knock it over and crush themselves or something. I don't know. Yeah. But anyway, let's talk about our final couple in the competition, Brian and Sarah. And they made the choice that made my heart sing. They made one choice that maybe wasn't aesthetically appealing, but in my mind made the house so much more functional. And what was that, Stephen?
The curved wall.
No!
You mean it's not having taken away space in order to put a curved wall in the kitchen?
Okay, we disagree on the curved wall. I liked the curved wall. I thought it sort of gave character to that space and, made the whole house like it's kind of a boxy house. So the curved wall was one thing they did that I thought was pretty cool, but it was not my favorite thing they did. You're not gonna say what the favorite thing is, Stephen?
Oh, this is yours. This is all you.
The elevator. Okay, as someone who lives in a 3-story house with the kitchen and the master bedroom both not on the ground floor, we have an elevator and we love it. I mean, you can put your groceries in it, you can put your luggage in it when you come back from a trip. It's really handy when you have a lot of steps. And I would say also, for people who have mobility issues, if you live in a 3-story house and you have mobility issues, you're really in trouble if you can't get around, right? And, you look at Florida, there are a lot of retirees who live in Florida. They're probably going to experience mobility issues at one point or another. So an elevator can make the house a lot more livable, and it may even allow you as an older person to stay in your house longer. So I thought this was an awesome choice, and I know I'm prejudiced because I have an elevator and I love it. But I will say, I don't think it was a choice that was going to help them win the kitchen dining room competition, but it could be the choice that ends up helping them win the whole competition at the end.
Yeah, and talking about how much some things cost. Again, this team was striving to be in the $75,000 range, and they spent $35,000 on the elevator. I think I agree. I think in the end, being able to get on the elevator and come up, it was kind of cool because it's got glass doors on it. So, which I wasn't exactly sure how that was going to work when I was watching it. But yeah, you can come up the elevator and you can see what's going on outside as it's coming to rest. So yeah, I think the elevator was a good choice there.
And if you compare the $35,000 on the elevator to the $25,000 that the twins spent on the wine room, I think from a functionality and appeal of this house to a broader range of people, there's no question. And the spending was comparable.
Yeah, the spending was comparable from the judge standpoint. Now maybe we'll get a different judge, in the final when they judge it, they may say it differently, but. They said that they would get no increase from the wine storage.
On the appraisal value.
On the appraisal value. No increase. So that's $25,000 out of a $250,000 budget. That is not going to help your appraised value at all. Mm-hmm. And I'll be honest with you, as far as aesthetic or quality of life, I think that's still a big zero.
Well, some people, though, the wine room was pretty, I thought. And for some people, it could be the wow thing that they really want. But again, that's a specific buyer. Yeah,
a specific buyer. But the $35,000 that they spent on an elevator, to go back and to retrofit an elevator, you're looking at so much more money. So I think having the elevator definitely adds value. And, we'll see how that plays out in the future. Mm-hmm. This team made a different decision from the other teams in that they put, let me get this right, the front and the back of the house, they put the elevator in the front of the house facing the back of the house, not all the way back. They actually took...
Sort of in the middle of the house, yeah.
Well, closer to the back because they have the pantry, because it was even with the stairs, right? So the end of the... kitchen was even with the end of the stairs. So on the wall across from the stairs is where they put in this slightly curved wall, and then they had their kitchen table, so you would be looking over the island to look out. So everything was kind of the other kitchens were set so that the through of the kitchen was going out the window, and this one it was set up in a different orientation as well as being differently in the front of the house.
All three other houses, the long axis of the island was on the long axis of the house.
There you go.
And in this house, it was the opposite, right? The long axis of the island was sort of along the short axis of the house. So, and they set the kitchen back further, right? So instead of setting the kitchen right up against the windows where you had the balcony and the waterfront view, their kitchen was back further, but it was completely open. So they had sort of this curved wall that set the space. And I imagine in the island, and so their kitchen is set up to be completely open to the living area, right? So just a different approach. It didn't pay off for them this week in terms of winning the challenge. But maybe, again, this is a choice that sets them apart when it comes time to do the living area. Well, we shall see.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because it was a judging of kitchen and dining room, and they decided not to have a dining room.
I think that hurt them.
Well, it surely gave the judges nothing to judge. Now, granted, Keith and Evan, Keith apparently doesn't like dining rooms, and so he wasn't worried that he made his very small. Of course, that goes along with his cozy concept, but he did have a dining room. And so, watching these shows, it's entirely possible that this week they didn't have the budget to do the elevator and do a dining room, and that maybe in a future week they come back and they put the dining room in if they think they've got more time. But I guess we'll see how that goes. Their idea was to have a live-in kitchen, and so just off the kitchen island, they built this kind of curved area that you could sit. I think it was 4 chairs around that, and that the curve of that matched the curve of the wall, and was it Brian? I guess Brian is a very talented builder, and so he built all of that, and I thought it looked disjoint. I guess the top of that table matched the wall, but to me it didn't match the kitchen. If I was there, maybe I'd have a different impression. Just looking at it on TV, I thought, well, that just doesn't look like it goes together.
I thought it was great for family dining and everyday dining, like as sort of a breakfast nook type of concept. Okay, it's a little different, it's a little funky, but I think in terms of like where you're going to have your Thanksgiving dinner, not terrific. Again, we'll see what happens in the future. I mean, they could have just an outstanding dining area out on the balcony, right, where they could seat 10 people or something, and maybe that's more practical if you've got waterfront living in Florida. But again, I think it's for your informal gatherings or just day-to-day family life. What they did was cool, but if you're really intending on doing entertaining, it's kind of limited.
Yeah, I think you mentioned when we were watching this that anything that they want to carry to the balcony has to navigate around whatever they put in that space between the kitchen and the outdoor area. So if they, you've got to carry stuff through the living room, maybe a future dining room, whatever they do, the back and forth. Now, if you're somebody that likes to get their steps in, this is going to be for you. I am definitely a 100% elevator riding, not getting my steps in kind of guy, and so granted, it's not that big. I think these homes are 3,500 square feet, 3,500 square foot. So the main space it's not like it's a long way to go, but having to navigate around stuff does kind of decrease that indoor-outdoor living.
Yeah.
concept.
Yeah. So let's talk about the judging. So I already gave it away at the beginning of the podcast. Sorry about this. This is our first podcast. We'll improve. But the winner was,
Maybe we'll improve.
Drum roll, Paige and Mitch, right?
You spoiled it again.
So, Stephen, did you think this was the right decision?
Yeah, I think they did a really good job. The indoor-outdoor living, I think, is really what took them over the edge. They really made the kitchen look functional, except they put the spice rack behind the stove.
Yes. So you have to get spices. You have to reach over the burners. And, for sure, I would catch a sleeve on fire at some point or another, right? But that's kind of a minor thing, I guess.
But yeah, because you don't have to use it for spices, and it was a hidden thing. So it was something they had spent time on, so that the marble was up there, and you could kind of move the doors out of the way to get to the spices. So you don't have to have your spice rack there. So you're not requiring people to almost set themselves on fire if they buy the place. But then you've got this space back there that what is somebody going to do with? So it's not really that big of a detriment, but it was kind of funny because the judges didn't like that either.
Yeah. I mean, I thought their aesthetic was good. I thought it was pretty. The design was nice. I thought really, and I'm surprised to say this, I thought from a pure color selection feel perspective, I really liked the twins with sort of the green that they brought into the kitchen and the granite and what have you. But, they didn't have any sort of kitchen lift. They didn't have the indoor-outdoor space usage. And, we really questioned the investment in the wine room. But I thought from a sort of nice Florida feel, to me, that was the most appealing.
Yeah, I think we talked about Brian and Sarah that we really liked a lot of their decisions, and we liked the elevator. The judges pointed out that the microwave is in the pantry, and it's about knee high.
You would hate that.
I would hate that. And, we've got one that's that high. I never use it. I'm over 6 foot tall. I have to sit on the floor. I don't know what the buttons are. It's just not for me. So, I think that was another thing that they kind of missed that probably hurt them a little bit in the assessment. But I think all in all, I think as they didn't have the dining room. How can you judge a dining room? And they were looking at more of the long term with the elevator than winning this particular week.
Yeah.
So.
And I could imagine living in Paige and Mitch's house and how I would use that. And you could see having your friends out on the balcony, using the kitchen lift. All of those things were good choices. So Stephen, how would you rank our 4 competitors based on this first challenge?
Yeah, that's just off this week, I'd have to say that I think that Paige and Mitch are on the right path, and I think Sarah and Brian are on the right path, and I think I hope that Keith has gotten his artwork out of the way and can focus now on the living spaces instead of trying to find a way to do more impactful art that he can do himself. Because I'm not the biggest art aficionado in the world, but I believe there are other artists in the world.
You could make a choice of other art. It doesn't have to be made by the designer. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's good to know because I wasn't quite sure. So, hopefully I don't have a lot of hope for them. I guess they did win a single week in season 3, and they're on the right path to keep that streak alive.
I hope they win. It would be sad. Not win the whole competition, but I hope they win a competition. It would be sad for them to go another season and not win a competition.
Yeah, it would. I mean, they seem like really nice people, and it's funny. Maybe they'll put a closet in the master bath.
In the master suite this time, yeah.
Hopefully they've learned. They said, it was interesting to see that the different teams and what they said they took away from being on the show before and how, it made an impact in how they did their work going forward. And so, you never know. These guys, they could surprise us. I hope they do, because it's going to be really boring if I come on every week going, there they go again.
Yeah, well, I think, my ranking of the teams would be just based on this week. I thought Paige and Mitch did have the best kitchen design and dining room design, so I'd put them as number 1. I would put Sarah and Brian in a close second, because I do believe that the decisions they made would not win them the kitchen competition, but could set them up for good decisions later on in the competition, especially that elevator. I love it. I'm going to give the twins 3rd place for me. I really like their aesthetic. They didn't do anything wow except for the wine room, which was, arguably not a good use of funds. And then I have to put Keith and Evan in last place just for me. What they did was interesting, but the super muted tones and all of the architectural elements didn't say Florida waterfront to me. So I currently have them kind of taking up the last place, but I'm rooting for them. I hope they come back, and I hope they win one of the weeks during the competition. Yeah,
and as a bonus for having won, they Paige and Mitch got a $1,000 bonus to what they get to spend. Each week they're going to go up another $1,000. So next week it'll be $2,000. And I'm sure they're going to have to call out what it is that they used that $1,000 on. So it'll be kind of interesting to see how that is. I don't believe they said what they're working on next week, did they?
No, they didn't. They didn't say what the space was next week. Usually it's the living area off the kitchen, but we'll see. And by the way, just another thing to show that I think they really sort of have these designs laid out before they come to the competition is every year that extra $1,000 bonus always goes to something extra. It's not like, oh, we upgraded the tile because we got this $1,000, because I believe that stuff was ordered before they came to the competition. So we'll see how that plays out this season. But I think anything else we want to say about this week's episode, Stephen?
So you are pretty sure that Keith and Evan knew that backlit quartz was going to cost $75,000 before the show got taped?
I'm not sure what to make of that. Like, they had this super expensive backlit onyx that they wanted, which I'm not quite sure I would have loved it anyway. But they came in saying that was too expensive and they had to go with quartz. That does take away from my theory that they ordered this stuff in advance, but maybe they ordered it and it couldn't come in or something like that. So I don't know, but and maybe their fate would have been better if they would have gotten that original onyx that they wanted.
Well, I think that if you take the timeline and you compress it and you say, okay, these designs on this started a few months ago, and maybe they really did have their heart set on it, and they had their heart set on it so much, and then they looked into it and they figured out it was too expensive, that the show just wanted to capture that was something that they wanted to do, and all of these design decisions that they made or trade-offs that they have to make are impactful, and so you get a little bit of insight into what the designers are thinking. So I think that it just provides context. You really hate to think that, oh gosh, they wanted this stuff and they didn't know it was going to be $75,000 until the taping, because that's, that would be bad. Yeah,
they have to add drama, and it's quite possible that they wanted the backlit onyx. I'm going to practice saying that, and couldn't afford it, and they knew that before the competition, but they brought it into the competition as a point of discussion and to add some drama. So you never know. We're not behind the scenes people for HGTV. We're just people who have opinions about living spaces.
And have done a remodel or two.
Yeah, exactly. So thank you so very much for listening. We're happy that you were able to be on our podcast today. This is Talk the Block with Amy and Stephen, and we'll be back next week to talk about whatever space they do then.